One of your questions every first-time home buyer should ask. Question number 46: does when you close matter? So we're going to talk about timing your close. So we're at this final stage of you putting your offer in on a property, right? So when you think about closing, you want to make sure you have this conversation with your agent up front. You got to talk to your agent up front about the timing process, right? So this is the final step. The closing date that you choose is going to matter. It's going to affect you financially, so you have to take this a little bit more seriously than you expect. And I will say, if you're in a buyer's market, a seller's market, which we will talk about, will determine how flexible you can be when you're thinking about a closing. But typically a closing will take 30 days from the date of ratification. Date of ratification is when the buyer and the seller both come to terms on a price. So a few things to consider. So when you're in a seller's market, you have to think about, when do they want to close on a property? So that's either when they want to move out or if they want to rent back. So some of the properties in the spring market, you'll see that a lot of them are advertised with a rent back. So you can know when they want to get out of the property. And you also want to know when you need to move into the property. So whether that's if you're renting, you want to try to time that up with your lease ending. If you're relocating to the area, you're going to try to time that up with when your moving truck is going to arrive or when you're going to arrive. There's a lot of timing that goes into it. One thing to consider is when you're thinking about the different times of the month to close, you probably have heard that if you want to close at the end of the month so that you can have less expenses tied to buying a property. And that is true. When we're talking about closing time period, we're really talking about interest payments. Because mortgages are paid in arrears, that means that at the end of the month, you incur the fees for interest for the previous 30 days. And then you have to pay that bill by the 15th of the next month or so, right? So if you close at the beginning of the month, then you have interest payments all the way until that time period, right? So that will increase your closing costs. So you'll see a lot of lenders kind of recommend that the buyer tries to close at the end of the month as often as possible. And a lot of title companies, or a lot of closes in general, just happen at the end of the month. Why is that? So we kind of talked about it just a little bit, but on this diagram here, you'll notice that when you close, you take possession of the property. That's when your bill to the lender begins. So if you can decrease the time between your closing date and the end of your first month, then that will decrease how much money you have to bring to the table. And your first mortgage payment isn't until the end of month 2, whenever your lender says that payment is due. So that's why you'll notice that most lenders will recommend, or even most people online will say, try to close at the end of the month. And it's really just to minimize that interest payment. I don't think it's that big of a deal, to be honest with you, because properties come on the market when they come on the market, and you have to buy them. You have to buy what's available. So if our normal contract time period is between 30 and 45 days, if a property comes on the market at the beginning of the month, then you are probably going to be closing at the beginning of the following month because it's 30 days. Now, when you're scheduling your closings, let's say that you are able to control the transaction as much as possible, and the seller is open to you controlling this or taking your input. When you're closing, the title company has other customers that they're servicing, and you don't want to choose a date that they are going to have the most settlements or the most closings. So the last day of the month is always going to be the busiest for them. And we actually like to tell our clients that we want to close between Tuesday and Thursday. So only 3 days out of the week, we really want to close: Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And the main reason for that is if we close on a Monday, then there may be some issues that your lender has, and banks have banking hours. So they're not open on Saturday or Sunday. So if you have any problems whatsoever with your deal, you could wind up being delayed. And we don't want to be delayed, because then we have to go to the seller and ask them for an extension, which they can or cannot grant. So you want to be in control as much as possible. So try to close between Tuesday and Thursday. Now, the reason why you don't want to close on a Friday is that lenders or bankers, they're just like regular people, where, people kind of wind down on Fridays getting prepared for the weekend. You don't want to have somebody who leaves the office early, or you don't want to have somebody who's rushing to do a job. Not to say that they're not get the job done. It's just that you want to position yourself. If you can control as much as you can, you want to position yourself to have a smooth transaction. So avoid closing at the end of the month. And if you have to close at the end of the month, try to close between Tuesday and Thursday. You're scheduling the closing with the settlement company. The settlement company is going to reach out to you to schedule your closing. That's what's supposed to happen. But if the closing company or the settlement company is very busy, you want to be proactive and reach out to them. Now, this is assuming that you're not working with us, because on our team, we actually handle all of these responsibilities ourselves, where we schedule things on our client's behalf. But if you're not working with us and you work with somebody else, I don't know why you would do that. But you want to make sure that you're scheduling your settlement at least a week in advance, because there are time slots that the closing company has that they're filling up. And closing companies don't have like an unlimited amount of space. So there's usually one attorney, and then that attorney will just do one closing per hour on the busier days, right? So you want to make sure that they can accommodate your schedule. So maybe you're going to work that day and you're going to have a later closing, like maybe like a 4 o'clock closing, which 4 o'clock closings suck. I just want to let you know that, because things can happen that causes delays and we may have a problem getting in touch with people. If that's the best that you can do, schedule that in advance. Schedule that at least a week in advance. So when you're doing new construction, in your new construction contracts, some of those contracts say that the builder has 18 to 24 months to actually deliver a property. Now, most builders will say that they could deliver a property within 5 to 9 months. If you build in a single family home, sometimes you're in that 12-month time period. But for condos and townhouses, you're looking at between 5 to 9 months. That's what they say. But in the contract you sign, if you read it, we recommend that you read it. In the contract you sign, it says that they can take 24 months sometimes. So maybe there's a delay. Maybe they're not able to get building supplies. Maybe your certificate of occupancy doesn't come in. There's all these things that can happen. And one of these scenarios actually happened to one of our clients who was buying a property in Fairfax in the Pender Oaks subdivision. I believe the builder was Cahovania, and they had a problem with getting this was a condo, and they had a problem with the fire alarm inspection. And so that was the last inspection before the developer could get the certificate of occupancy. My client luckily had a family member that lived in the region. But he was relocating from up north, but he has a family member already that was here. And so the closing was delayed by 3 weeks, I believe. So just imagine, he already had a mover scheduled. He has a job that is expecting him to participate in perform his functions while he's here, and he did not make that closing time period. So you want to make sure you give yourself space when you're buying new construction properties to have somewhere else that you could live, or at least have a plan B in the event that your closing is delayed. Now, for regular people, these are people who are just buying properties that are resale properties where there's already somebody living in them. The way I like to counsel my clients is, first of all, you want to work backwards from the date that you move in. So we're going to take the date that you're moving in, and then we're going to add 30 to 45 days to that date. That is your contract to close date. So that's from the date of ratification to closing. I know I already mentioned that a normal closing is 30 days. Now, why would I tell you to do 45 days? Well, in some instances, you may have an extended closing, right? So we already talked about, if you can control the closing as much as possible, you want to close at the end of the month. You may have to add a few days. Also, the seller may want to add a few days on their behalf. Now, the next thing you want to do is you want to add another 60 to 90 days to actually find a property. Right. So you're adding another 60 to 90 days. So that means that you're really looking at about 3.5 months in the event that the seller isn't looking for a rent back. If you're buying a property in the springtime, then you want to add an additional 60 days to the time that you're going to look for a property to accommodate for the seller's potential rent back. So we're going to add another 60 days to this whole list, and this is for rent backs. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, Abraham, I'm not going to let the seller stay in the property after I buy it. I mean, that's fine in a buyer's market. In a buyer's market, you can control things. In a seller's market, the seller will just select from multiple offers that all are offering similar things. So you don't have as much control. Okay. So this is a rent back. Okay. So that is it. This is question number 46 from 100 questions every first time home buyer should ask. Does when you close matter? It does matter. It does matter. You want to make sure you schedule that properly, and make sure you talk to your agent at the beginning of the process about what your timeline and deadlines are.